Yo, what is up guys, Delboy here, aka Blue Collar Sports TV. Hopefully you guys are doing well. If you're new here, smash that like, hit subscribe, all of that good stuff. So this past weekend marked the debut of Matchroom on Dazn UK. Of course, Matchroom recently left Sky Sports to sign an exclusive deal with Dazn in the UK. And, off the back of that, there was a lot of hype in regards to these new Matchroom UK shows. A lot of promises were made, including upgrading the production value, the punditry, and even the quality of fights, which is the main thing. But what did I make of Matchroom's debut on Dazn UK? Well, first and foremost, I will say the actual quality of the show in regards to the fights was decent enough. It wasn't outstanding, it wasn't poor, it was a solid night of domestic boxing. I heard some people on social media say that it was terrible. I think that's a bit unfair. I felt the main event between Can Xu and Lee Wood was relatively entertaining. Tommy McCarthy versus Chris Billam-Smith was a pretty good fight, very competitive, could have gone either way. So in my opinion, the two main fights on this card delivered to some extent. So the actual quality of boxing on the night wasn't too bad. Could have been better, but it wasn't too bad. But what about the actual punditry? The production value, which is what everybody was talking about before this show. Now, in my opinion, the actual production value, punditry, was on par or actually worse than Sky Sports. In regards to the actual production value, one thing I didn't really like was the lack of camera angles during this card. We kind of got the same sort of 3 or 4 camera angles throughout the show, and you may think that's not a big deal, but of course it is. Boxing's a sport where fighters have their backs to the camera. Sometimes it's hard to see what's going on. And in my opinion, the lack of camera angles and the lack of quality camera work was apparent in this show. That was never really Sky Sports' strong point, but Sky Sports had far better camera work than what was displayed on this first Matchroom UK show. Now, I'm sure in regards to the production value, it being held in Eddie Hearn's back garden, I'm sure that doesn't really help proceedings, to be honest. I'm sure you get far more resources and far more space in a big arena. And yeah, the production value, certainly in terms of appearance, just looked a little cheap to me, if I'm being honest. In regards to the actual punditry and commentary, well, again, Sky Sports really set a low bar for the standard of commentary, but what I heard on Fight Camp Week 1 was absolutely diabolical. And arguably worse than Sky Sports. I can't believe I'm saying that. Let's start with Maya Jama. Now, Maya Jama, listen man, very beautiful woman. I wouldn't kick her out of bed. In fact, I'd give a left nut to get her in bed. But as a presenter, she did a pretty bad job, to be honest. And yeah, you could say it was her first show, but her job in general is being a presenter. And she made some pretty basic errors that any sort of research would have solved. Misnaming titles, calling the WBA title the WA title. I'm pretty sure she called Tommy McCarthy Paul McCartney, and various other basic errors throughout this broadcast. Now, Maya Jama wasn't introduced to wax lyrical about boxing and educate us. She's there to be a pretty face and ask basic questions, but she still needs to get the basics right. When you're making that many mistakes, in regards to what you're covering, it kind of takes you out of the event, I guess I would say. So Maya Jama, in terms of the looks department, 10 out of 10. In terms of performance, 2 out of 10. And sometimes you get that with the pretty girls. Sometimes the performance is lacking because the appearance is stunning. So, keep that in mind as you go through life. Any young dudes following this channel. But Maya Jama has to do better. As for Tony Bellew, aka Harley Quinn, as my good friend G-Man would call him, Tony Bellew's being Tony Bellew, a safe pundit, doesn't really criticise the home fighter. He's there as a mouthpiece, really. He's not going to say anything that is enlightening, educational or critical of the home fighter. Tony Bellew is what he is, really. He is a cheerleader, essentially, for the home fighter. I mean, let's say, for example, we had a Roy Keane type pundit in the boxing world. He would have roasted Campbell Hatton, regardless of whether he was a novice or not. He would have roasted him But, Tony Bellew giving us the safe punditry and analysis of that situation wasn't critical, didn't really give us any insight. I mean, any pundit worth his salt would just tell it how it is with Campbell Hatton. They would be honest and just say this guy's a raw novice, and they would be questioning whether he's ready to be on such a show, such a high spot on a televised show. They would be saying what a lot of people are saying in the boxing world. This guy needs to go away for 12 months, fight on small hall shows, gain some experience, and then maybe come back in 12 months' time after he's got some fights under his belt and more experience, in the ring and also in the gym. But, Tony Bellew's not going to say that. He's going to gloss over the cracks and basically sell you this product, which ultimately is a pile of crap right now. As for Laura Woods, the interviewer, I didn't think she did a bad job, to be honest. She's actually kind of made her bones in sport. She's worked for Sky, she's worked for TalkSport. I don't really have a problem with Laura Woods. Commentary, fuck me. Andy Lee on commentary was absolutely abysmal. His scoring of certain fights was appalling. The Tommy McCarthy fight and also the main event with Kanzu and Lee Wood, the scoring was appalling. I'm not sure what he was watching in that ring. They weren't the fights in which I was seeing personally, and a lot of people have said that about Andy Lee and his commentary on this card. I actually quite like Andy Lee as a pundit, but as a commentator, I'm not really sold on Andy Lee, to be honest, and I think maybe they should actually put Andy Lee in punditry with Tony Bellew. We're not going to get rid of Tony Bellew, so chuck Andy Lee in punditry, chuck him with Bellew, and see how that works out. As for Chris Lloyd, I felt Chris Lloyd was pretty solid. I like Chris Lloyd as a commentator, still got a lot to learn, but I like the way Chris Lloyd breaks down fights. I think he's quite educated in his boxing takes. Again, I don't agree with Chris Lloyd every single time, but to me, he always comes across as relatively unbiased and just a guy who loves the sport. So I quite like Chris Lloyd, but Andy Lee, in my opinion, was pretty poor. Darren Barker to me is what he is. He doesn't really offer any great insight, in my opinion, but at the same time, I don't think Darren Barker says anything that's necessarily super wrong. He's just like a run-of-the-mill commentator, to be honest. So, Darren Barker's okay. I can take him or leave him. It is what it is. But all in all, I felt this event just really felt a bit too much like Sky. I didn't notice any drastic improvements, and to be honest, if I were watching these fights without knowing what channel they were on, I would just assume they was on Sky. It sounds exactly the same to me. The problem I've always had with Matchroom in the UK and Matchroom previously on Sky Sports is that the whole production, the commentary team, the punditry, it just seems like an old boys club, jobs for the boys type of scenario kind of thing. Everyone's kind of pulling for the home fighter. It's all like a big cheerleading exercise, more so than actual analysis of what is going on in a fair and unbiased manner. And all TV networks and promotional companies have this problem in boxing, especially in 2021. But to me, Matchroom have always been one of the biggest culprits for this. It just comes across as so blatant, and it's not really disguised whatsoever. So yeah, I mean, all in all, Fight Camp Week 1, the production quality, in my opinion, could definitely be improved, and the commentary and punditry definitely needs to be improved. The actual quality of the first show in terms of fights, I actually felt was quite decent. I enjoyed the main event between Kanzu and Lee Wood. I quite liked the Tommy McCarthy fight against Chris Billum-Smith. That was a good fight as well. Jack Collin versus Avni Yildirim was alright. Anthony Fowler looked pretty good. The actual quality of the show wasn't too bad, but everything else that came with that needs to be improved, because right now, to me, it just feels exactly like Sky Sports. And one further thing I will say, I never watched this fight live, or these fights live, sorry. I was out that day and, having a few drinks and whatnot, but I was looking on social media, basically just keeping up with the results kind of thing. And one thing I noticed on Twitter and social media, this show wasn't trending like the regular Matchroom show. On Sky Sports, when a Matchroom show was on, even if it wasn't a big show, it would always be trending and, there'll be a lot of interactions on social media in regards to that show. However, when I was on social media following the results for this show, there were far less interactions on social media. So, people made a big deal of the reach of Sky and how powerful Sky are in terms of promotion. I think people had a point when they brought that up, because even before this first Fight Camp show, there didn't really seem to be a buzz for Fight Camp this year, whereas last year there was actually quite a buzz for Fight Camp, believe it or not, in the UK. Quite a lot of people were getting excited about it on social media. Now maybe that's just because, Fight Camp's run its course. Quite frankly, I don't really believe we need it this year. Last year it happened because there was nobody allowed in arenas, and it was very hard to book shows. So the whole Fight Camp idea was actually a good idea at that time, but this year, now arenas are back open and you can have fans, I don't really believe Fight Camp is needed, to be honest, and maybe people just see it as a bit of a gimmick that isn't really worth anything, who knows. But all in all, Fight Camp Week 1, in terms of the fights, they was okay, they were solid. Everything else needs to be improved. Anyway, share your thoughts below. It's been your guy Delboy, and shout out to Maya Jammer every single time. Peace.